Hi guys, welcome to the Gun Shop with me, Johnny. Today we're going to do a bit of a comparison between the ATA arms at SP Sporting 30 inch and this a second-hand 686 Silver Pigeon 1 30 inch Sporting. Both fantastic guns, I might add. However, I've watched a few reviews on the ATA and read quite a few and sort of looked in the press, and they seem to be milking this idea that Beretta ran out of patent and they are just a Beretta for half the price. And we're here today to see if A, that's true, and B, if it's not true, how different is it? So I've taken an awful lot of measurements, so excuse me if I refer to my pad, because they're very similar but just different enough. First, before we move on to anything, and we'll start with stocks in terms of comparison, we'll look at how they come apart. And this will obviously we'll go into later, but the biggest difference between them is on one, you have a push button fore end, and on the other, you have a lever style fore end. Alright, so without further ado, coming close, let's have a look at how different these stocks are. So, let's start with the back of both of them. Here we have the Beretta and here the ATA. Starting with the Beretta is fitted at the back with a Beretta pad. On all modern Berettas they have this interchangeable pad system that I'm sure you're all familiar with, and that makes the actual stock length quite beautiful. From this particular stock you can take down from anywhere from 14 1/4 with their thinnest pad, with spacers. I mean, they do inch space, you can add a couple of inch spacers, you could probably take it out to 16 inches if you want without looking too ridiculous. But without spacers, you're going to have this at just under 15 inches, which is quite an impressive, variation if you think of the length of pull there. The ATA, however, is a fixed length of pull. It measures at 14 5/8 inch from the back of the trigger to the back of the pad. The pad on the Beretta, although there are different ones available, this one is the standard rubber one. They do an absolute vast array, although it comes with a standard rubber. You can get leather covered, you can get all sorts, micro core, even gel ones. What you're stuck with here is a hard section Pachmeyer copy. And as you can see around the edges, they didn't finish it too well, and for the sake of a bit of rubbing you could probably have this looking a lot nicer than it is. On the top you have a hard section skeet, and that's actually quite nice, and that takes away from the sort of the tackiness of the pad. But it's a good quality pad, and it's a good soft pad, and there's nothing wrong with it, apart from the fact that really you do want it just a little bit finished. Moving on. The Walnut is nothing really to write home about on either of these. However, you can see from the quality of the Beretta Walnut, and certainly from the density of it, it is a better selection of wood. However, in the great scheme of things, they both look like grade 1s, so nobody's going to write home about either. You can see really a lot of what I'd like to say the finesse of a stock is not there on this. If you look at the nose of the stock on this by comparison to this, you can see this is a lot sleeker by comparison to this, which is just a little bit fatter. If you actually take the physical measurement off of it, which I will just now, you're at 10mm versus 16mm. And it's just those little lines of finesse and quality that run through the Beretta that don't run through this. It's almost like they didn't finish it quite as well. But hey, it's 600 quid, guys, so for whatever negatives I give this gun, there's a lot of positives to the fact that it is brand new for £600, which means the second-hand market's going to be floating around the 300-400 mark before long. Moving on, let's just drop this top lever down, much like a Beretta, on that little stop pin there. We'll do the same with the Beretta. Moving on. Grip depth and width on the Beretta is quite good. It's very much more uniform. If we look down it, you'll see, let me just take the labels off. If we look down it, you'll see there is a fairly uniform growth and width down there. There's no palm swell to speak of or anything like that, but that's okay. And it is semi-full. And if we hold them up side by side, you'll see that the grip profile is very, very similar. What is very noticeable for me on the ATA, hold on just one second. What for me is very noticeable on the ATA is the fact that the grip flares out rather than, so I get myself out of the way there. The grip flares out quite a lot, and you can see that it chamfers out towards the bottom. For me, this forces my hand just a little bit too high. Although it fills the hand nicely at the bottom, the whole radius of the grip, and perhaps it's to do with the fact that it's not tapered properly and at the top, just feels very flat, and I find it hard. Although it fills my hand nicely in terms of size around here, the rest of it just leaves a bit to. I just feel wanting, you know. Whereas with this one, you have a nice bit, your whole palm fits around it, and it's a lot more like a glove in your hand. It's designed just that little bit better. The checkering, both guns are laser checkered. The ATA is slightly coarser than the Beretta, but again, there's not a lot of difference there. With the Beretta, you have this. It's much better quality. There's no doubt about it. Is you have a nice. They're both laser cut, but this little line around the outside, and the whole thing is just a little bit more sleek. That said, there's a lot to be said for coarse checkering, and if this is going to be your farm and truck gun, or your rough gun perhaps by comparison, that coarse checkering will be a lot of godsend in the rain, when you're muddy, when you're wearing gloves, that sort of thing. Extra coarseness is good. The headwork on both, actually, that wood to metal fit on both of these guns is fantastic, and actually I'd probably give it to the ATA that the wood to metal fit is better on that. It's really quite surprisingly. You have a lot of nice chamfering around the headwork on the ATA, and actually I think the headwork on the ATA wins out of the two, which surprises me given the rest of the stock isn't quite so nice. If we look at this one here, you have a bit of a line round the head, although this is particularly a good one. You have a little line round here as well, and although it's quite good, it's not as good as this. This is actually really quite fantastic. Alright, that's your stocks. Drop on both stocks is, referring to the 37 and 58mm on the ATA and 33 and 55 on the Beretta. The Beretta Go is that little bit higher. Perhaps if you don't like a high stock, that's something that might be of a thing when we're talking all of 3mm, but 3mm can be quite a lot. What I certainly notice, however, with the Beretta's height is counteracted by the fact it's got quite a lot of cast. And it's hard to see really right now without the gun together, but this gun is cast off quite significantly, and this is still this is a factory gun. It's got a lot of cant, so you can see at the toe you've got a lot more cast than you do here at the heel. The heel still has a good, probably, let's not commit too much, just under 1/4 inch of cast in total, which is very impressive for a factory gun nowadays. Most people commit very little to cast, given their guns can be universally. If you look down this gun, although you have quite a lot of cast at the heel, all they've really done is rotate around a centre index. So actually what you end up with is almost cast on, actually adverse cast, pushing your head off the rib here. They do cast, and they cast well enough. That's all I have to say, really. Something that we'll notice really a bit later when we get into actions is the overall width of the ATA is different, and this is where they really start to shine in their differences. Is the ATA at the head and the action width, the head and action width, I believe, is 46mm, and that width is therefore carried through the grip. If you look at the grip on this, you're looking at, in the centre, 37mm, and on the Beretta, 34mm. So the Beretta is actually just a bit sleeker through the grip, which is surprising, really. The depth on both, however, is the same, more or less. That action width will come into a minute, actually dictates that they are not the same. Because if it was a copy of a Beretta action, ergo, it would also be 40mm wide, not 46. However, that width of action does help your fingers wrap around a little bit, and there is something to be said for that. However, all I'd really do if it was mine is I'd probably take a bit of meat out of here, just so your hand fits in nicer, and I'd probably, although it would take a bit of fixing, knock this chamfer off the bottom of the grip. It just feels wrong. It feels wrong around the back here. It digs into your hand a little bit, but that's just me. Again, if you choke your gun up a bit, you won't notice that. So there you go. All right, so that was the stocks. If you have any questions of stocks, please drop them below. And now we're going to move on to the Fore End. Right, so here is our two Fore Ends. The Beretta Fore End, as you can see, is a schnabel. If you go for older Berettas, they will have this semi-beaver tail chamfered thing here. One thing that is quite evident on the ATA is that it has a really deep belly, and that actually kind of fills your hand lovely. If you think about the gun as a whole, it's like a semi-beaver tail. For those of you who prefer more of a sleek and a schnabel, it won't suit you particularly well, but that's nothing to do with me. Here's another thing, the Beretta Fore End is a clear, probably 3/4 of an inch longer. We've also discussed, I prefer a longer Fore End, I hold my left arm out nice and straight, so that's that. Lever release Fore End and a push button Fore End. And now if we look inside, you'll see the quality of the Beretta Fore End iron is second to none really, it's one of my favourites. However geeky that might sound. You have a single piece iron here, it runs all the way through, the only thing holding it into the stock are these two screws here. The ATA is held into the gun by a screw, but it is two separate irons and two separate attachments. And I've never been a great fan of the push button Fore Ends on cheaper guns. Guarini seem to have got it quite right, but even then sometimes they have issues. The beauty of a lever gun is if you ever have it stuck on the gun, it's a lot easier to remove without potentially snapping your wood. And that's that. Apart from that, there is a bit of a weight difference. And whilst talking about this, I should talk about the actual stock weight difference. The action and stock on the ATA was 1,715 grams, 1715, and the Beretta was 2,000 grams. That's 2 kilograms. That's a differential of about 285 grams, which is 10 ounces. That's a lot of difference just between these two pieces here, by the way. I would say there's something suspect when a gun is wider and bigger and yet weighs a lot less. Certainly there's a bit more wood on that Beretta, and sorry for jumping back to the stocks. If you look at the Beretta, the stock comes in at 135mm deep by comparison to the ATA, which is 128mm deep. And although there's a lot of wood difference there, you can feel in your hand the balance is also quite forward. So that smaller action is ergo denser. We'll get into that. Go back to Fore Ends quickly. There's checkering on both. On this one you have the sort of more jagged style down the sides and nothing on the bottom. And the Beretta I think has a better all-round checkering on it. Obviously the field gun is different to this sporter in its checkering pattern, but I find this very satisfactory. I'm more of an American Fore End fan with the rounded type, but again, that's not a great deal. The weight difference between these two is 262 for this and 332 for this. It's heavier, it's denser, and that generally it just feels better quality and better finished. Not that there's anything about this that doesn't, however, I'm not a fan of two-piece irons and I'm not a fan of push buttons, and it's just, not that it'll be a recipe for disaster, but it might be in 10 to 20 years time if you accidentally buy one then. If ATA is still around, and they're still got some second-hand value and there's still parts available and you still then feel like you want to buy one. Anyway, moving on, let's go to the barrels. There's quite a big difference there. So, here we are. Here are the barrels. And it actually took me a second to realise whose barrels were whose. These are the Berettas and these are the ATAs. Both come with a gloss finish. I believe the 28-inch, for some bizarre reason, comes in a phosphate black finish and not a high gloss that the 30-inch one does. I'm not sure why that is, but being a cheaper gun, that's just going to be the way they are. Or they might change to gloss when they fancy. We're starting with the ATA barrels. The ATA barrels weigh in at 1,490 grams, which is quite surprising actually. The Berettas are 1,390. Most of you will understand, I hope, or at least appreciate my opinion, that cheap barrels are generally more heavy. And that's the way. It's not an opinion, that's just general fact. And I was amazed at how light these actually were, given that I've measured a couple other 30 inches this morning just to give myself confidence, thinking that all of 4 ounces wasn't very much, 100 grams difference wasn't very much, that actually these are a very impressive cheap barrel, and I'm very, very impressed, I say. Let's pop the ejectors out quickly. We'll start with having an ejector comparison. Alright, certainly just taking them out there, they're exactly the same as a Beretta to take out. You just push in and twist. The ATA come jeweled, the Berettas do not come jeweled. I suppose the real test would be to put one in the other and see if that works. They are an identical copy. You know, the ATA felt a bit more raunchy to get out, but again, it's a £600 gun, you can't expect quite the same tooling and finishing as you do on the others. But you do get a jeweled finish, unlike the Beretta, which is nice. However, bearing in mind this part moves back and forward a lot, I would have thought that would either wear. However, looking at it in the gun, it's a little bit more recessed than the Beretta one is. Alright, let's pop these back in quickly. So, if you have a little look, you'll see why they do not fit. As you can see, they are pretty much totally different. Because of that action width, the ejector width and barrel width is also very different at the lumps here. And as such, actually, there's an order with which you have to put these in. If you try and put one in whilst the other one's in first, it won't go. Which is an awful design, but again, it's £600. And as soon as you know that, it doesn't matter anymore. Whereas a Beretta, you can pull one out, pull the other one out, and you'll be absolutely fine. The ATA, you cannot do that. So, as I said, in a real pinch, you might be able to get one to work in the other with a massive amount of firework, but in reality, no, these ejectors are not interchangeable. And the ATA ejectors are a silly design. Alright, but ejectors over, they do eject. When you put the gun together, they eject and time very well out of the box, and that's something to be fairly impressed with. So, and they will time very much the same, given they have that same hook system in the fore end, which again, I missed. You have that same hook system here, that same ejection system, which is very good. We like that. Again, copying some of their good ideas is a great thing, however, they are not the same. I think we're discovering that very slowly. We move on to your fore end lump there. This is the Beretta. This is the ATA. Very different hook system, very different lump system, and a very different catch system, which is obvious from the way that the fore ends are, but they are extremely different. Part of why Beretta is very good is this fore end lump is very intelligent, and this is a lot bigger and hence a lot deeper, and that's probably why the fore end is a lot deeper rather than intelligent design. It's just fortunate design. This sporter has a solid midrib on the Beretta, which is a bit odd. But you have this same empty hole at the back. And lo and behold, this one is exactly the same, which is quite nice. Both ribs are non-tapered, and the ATA comes with a large orange sight, whereas the Beretta comes with a small white one. They're both threaded in, however, so you can change them very well. Rib width on the Beretta is a 9mm parallel, and on the ATA is an 8mm parallel. Again, they're both filed. The coarseness of the filing, as with all things on this ATA, is just a little rougher, but the actual sight playing down it is quite nice. I must say I'm very impressed. Moving on to chokes. If we pull the chokes out of the ATA, you will see that they are indeed mobile chokes. This Beretta is fitted with Optima being the sporter, but the game guns and the older sporters are also fitted with mobiles. I do, however, have it on authority that they aren't quite exactly the same, which is a shame. Although they will fit, you'll find that engineering tolerances in this gun are not quite as good as a Beretta, so you might find some chokes will fit and some chokes don't, depending on the barrel, depending on the thread, and depending on who cut it that day. You know, the actual quality control isn't quite top notch on them, and you do end up with a couple of holes in your blacking and a couple of bits here and there, and that's something that I'm noticing all the way across, that the Beretta has a couple of marks, but this Beretta is 5 years old. 4 years old, sorry. So this Beretta has had a bit of life. This one should be brand new in the box, but again, you're paying £600, you're not going to get a quality controlled finished masterpiece. It's not what you're paying for. You're paying for a gun that works. If we have a little look, the barrels are joined together in a totally different way. This is the ATA and this is the Beretta. This has nicely laid ribs. This is more of, actually, it seems bound to a single piece midrib, whereas this is more of a traditionally laid rib round the sides and round the back, which is nice. It's actually really very nice. I'm a great fan of how Beretta lay their ribs, and it looks very classic and very normal. This looks a little bit more like the Longthorn style of just making them out of one single piece. Both barrels are monoblock, meaning they have a block on the back and they're ball welded in. And bore size, the ATA is a, sorry, we are covering a lot of information here, so sorry if I'm talking too quickly today. This is 18.4 bore size, and this is an 18.6 bore size, so that's all of 0.2. I would say this is perhaps a bit overboard, but that will give you a much smoother shooting gun, one way or another. These are more a classic bore, and will take most cartridges and shoot them quite well. However, you might find it is a little bit more punchy, which is fine. Because it's a shotgun, so it's not designed to be nice. These are both steel proofed. This one, there's all sorts of magical proof on there, but this is, more importantly, they're both steel proofed, so you can take this gun out and shoot everything you can through this gun. They're both 3-inch, they're both very exciting, and that worked very well. Alright, I think that's everything I have to say about the barrels, which is quite good, really. And so, let's move on without further ado to the action. So, let's just pull both of these pads off quickly and take the stocks off and see how we go. So here's another key difference. The Beretta takes a Beretta stock key. You just chuck the key in. And away you go. Couldn't be simpler. Really, really nice. And as you can see, the key, the bolt has a little head in the top, and that makes life very, very simple. The ATA doesn't. The ATA runs off of one of these, aka a normal stock bolt. It's a big nothing, but again, it's enough of a thing that makes me, again, err towards an older Beretta perhaps than one of these. Not that it's particularly hard, and more people will have one of these than they will a Beretta stock bolt. Again, it's just a personal preference thing. There we go. Just a stock bolt comparison. That is your ATA, and that is your Beretta. How nice is that? The Beretta again shines out in quality there, but there's nothing wrong with a traditional stock bolt type, so don't get too fussed about it. Let's pop the action off, and as we can see, that is an ATA action. And let's take the Beretta off. Excuse me, so this is a bit tighter in the headwork, which is good. Just a little tap, and she'll come off, like that. Again, the actual quality of headwork internally is better on the Beretta, which, to be fair, after all the external quality of this, it shocks me really. I say the external quality of the headwork on that. Alright, so now here's your big difference. One is the Beretta 686, and this is not a Beretta 686. This is a SP special. Where do we start? Differences. The differences are vast. This is a trigger plate action, a true trigger plate action. I can take everything off the bottom here, as we've described in the Beretta videos in the past, and it's still a working trigger plate action unit. It's worth also mentioning that it's held on with a screw, with a little locking screw in the top there and a big screw through the top. That is a lovely quality thing. I'm a great lover of that. Moving on to this. The screw in the bottom is just a 4-piece cross. It's what Beretta used to do back in the 70s and early 80s. It's not a trigger plate action, although it has got a trigger plate with an action on it. As you can see when we pull the trigger here, actually it's a top-loaded sear gun. And that is why the trigger pulls are awful by comparison to Beretta, which is surprising that they copied so much else and they didn't copy this. It's probably because the 686 action patent probably hasn't actually run out, and it's just something that they're letting everybody rumour mill between each other, because that's what the gun trading guns are all about. I will say there's a lot of parts they've taken from it that I really like. Mostly the self-contained firing spring units. That's really nice. At least they come greased. The safety is a bit graunchy, however, it's dry as a bone, so perhaps getting it lubricated wouldn't be a bad idea. That might soften it up. Unlike the Beretta, which has a very beautiful safety. I've seen a few people say that they are fiddly by comparison. These are fiddly, and this is not. However, most people don't ever really change a barrel selection anyway, so the fiddly part is a nothing. It just makes for a much smoother and sleeker looking safety catch. I must say, I love the bronze colour. I think that's awesome. I'm a big fan of that. Alright, other differences. I mean, apart from being a completely different action design, that's all I have to say. I'm not going to go too deep into this ATA because actually in reality, all I'm here to show you is that it is not a Beretta. And it's not a Beretta by quite a way in the way it's designed. It's got silly little bits and parts that this Beretta wouldn't have. This 680 series action is about one of the best. It's certainly in the top 3 actions in the world in terms of quality for an over and under, whereas this is not the same thing. That's probably, well, again, that's not probably why. That's why the triggers are a bit graunchy, because they're top loaded and the sear work probably isn't as best quality. But this is a working gun, and to remember that this gun you can take out of the box for £600 and go and shoot stuff. New, this is £1,650. Is this action worth £1,000? Yes, yes it is. But no, not necessarily. For £600 this is a very working, good action. Right, that's pretty much all there is to say. You know, they both have the same trunnion system. Whether they interchange, I don't know. Given it's a different action width, I would have thought not, but then, you know, they've copied it so far in looks that might be the case. When you hold them side by side, the barrel lock-up's the same, the hooks are the same, the action fences are the same. Look across the top levers are the same. Everything is very, very similar. But I will be very, very sure that I will say they ain't the same. I trust this, and this is an unknown quantity, but that's fine. I haven't actually weighed these two between them. So, the ATA action is actually 1 ounce heavier than this, which is strange. Maybe it's in my mind, maybe it's because they're in different hands. Maybe it's because it's bigger, it's softer, I don't know. Certainly something about this gun is softer. The edges are less well refined on the ATA, and actually that provides quite a nice smooth and soft finish. But yeah, it's 1 ounce heavier than this in the action. But that's to be expected because it is 4mm wider. And if you look at the actual action fences there, you'll see they do kick out a lot more than on the Beretta. But if we take a measurement from the front of the action, this is 42mm, and this is 39mm. So it's 3mm wider just at the actual true action, unlike this. And the obvious and easy way to try this is to just put this, take this, which is a Beretta barrel, try and pop it in there. And actually, it doesn't fit. That's really very surprising. Very odd. Which means the internal diameter must be different again. And again, excuse me that I'm discovering this at the same time as you, but that's all part of the beauty of our YouTube channel, is sometimes we don't know everything. It's 31mm internally on this one. To be fair, they are both 31mm internal, so they should technically fit, but they do not fit between each other. Let's just call it at that. There's a big rumour that, you know, they got all interchangeable parts, interchangeable everything, you can take an ATA stock and put it on the other. It just isn't true. I mean, if we just offer this one up, the ATA up, stock up, let's just drop that top lever over. The answer is just no. A great and resounding no. There's no way that this is going on. It's just the wrong shape for the gun, totally wrong shape. So, I think that's proof they're not the same. Not necessarily that they are not, you know, one is better than the other. I mean, the Beretta is better only because of what you're paying for, I suppose, more than anything. The Beretta has been around for 1,000 million years, and as such, spares are very available. You bring a Beretta to any gunsmith, bring it in here, bring it in anywhere, and we'll be able to get parts within 24 hours. If we don't have them, we'll probably have them. We'll know it inside out and be able to fix and diagnose your problems very easily. This is more of an unknown quantity, and I expect during its year's warranty you buy it with, it's going to require, not work, but it will require going back to the distributor, which is Sportsman Gun Centre, to have it done. But again, for £600, if it does break, don't break your heart. You know, most gunsmiths will be able to fix it, but if it's in need of new parts, you might be waiting a little while. Right, let's bolt it back together and give it a little bit of an overview and a balance and handling look, and that'll be us. So we've discussed that they're very different, but they're both nice in their own way. The Beretta, given its overall weight, I believe actually is 3 kilograms, 710 grams, is a little bit rearward heavy. I think it's just a particularly heavy stock on this one, but usually they're extremely neutral. This one balances about 1/4 inch behind the hinge pin. It's absolutely perfect, and that's lovely. As you can see, the trigger pulls are wonderful, and the selector works absolutely fantastic, although it is an inertia operated gun. If we take the 88 runs off of more of a mechanical firing style, and the trigger pulls are not quite as crisp. You've got a little bit of pickup in the instance, and you've got a little bit of creep and drag maybe. You've got an awful long engagement there. However, unless you've been spoilt or care an awful lot about your shotgun's triggers, they're good enough. You know, they're not hideous, they're not heavy, they're just very long and a bit spongy and a little bit creepy, but they're not rifle triggers, so again, it's not the end of the world, but good quality shotgun triggers do make shooting that little bit easier. The way it opens and closes is actually really satisfactory on both of these guns, and for a new gun it's not too tight. How that bodes in the long run isn't too bad either. I've played with a couple of these guns second hand that belong to clients, and they both feel very good actually in terms of long-term use. The way it mounts and swings on the ATA is pleasant enough, but like I said, that adverse roll means my eye is over here, and really most of these ATAs you'll find either you're going to need to roll your head right over and contort yourself around the gun, or they're not going to fit too many people off the rack. Balance wise, a bit front heavy. As we've discussed, the stock is very light. Overall, I believe it is 8 ounces lighter, 9 ounces lighter than the Beretta, which is quite impressive. It's not a particularly heavy gun. However, all that weight is in the front end, and I think it would benefit a huge amount by sticking about 4 ounces of lead in the back, just to bring some of that weight rearward, as well as a couple of the other modifications we've spoken about already. However, in handling, it feels like a longer barreled gun. It feels a little bit, where it's quite so light and quite so front heavy, it feels a little bit like an 828U almost, which isn't a bad thing. And in its own way, it's quite pleasant. What I find for a gun that has such a big palm, such a big grip, fat grip at the bottom, and such a big fore end, they really made it just a little bit too light, which is strange. Given the rest of its dimensions, you would have thought they would have already balanced it or put a bigger piece of wood on the back, just to make that whole thing come together as a big, heavy sporter, which it feels like it should be. However, that's not the end of the world, and they're both very pleasant, they're both just very different, and I think that's appreciating their differences and not the similarities is what people should be doing. Although it looks very similar to its Italian cousin, it's not. Alright guys, that's all from us. This isn't a video of hating ATA, this is just a video really to say they are totally different machines. There's so many videos out there saying that they're the same and they're comparable and it's basically just a copy. It really isn't. They are different enough that they are not the same. If it was a direct copy of the Beretta, I would say I was all behind it. When they first came out and they first got given me one, even when they were brought in by Wild Hunter, a completely different company, who was charging I think £950 for them, they're much more reasonable now at £650. I fell in love straight away. I picked it up, I was like, this is going to break the market, break the internet, because a gun that's a Beretta that's half the price of a Beretta, less than half the price of a Beretta is amazing. However, over a few years, and I let them sit and settle before even really stocking them, because I wanted to see how it went. And the answer is they've gone okay. But I've worked on a few subsequently now and I really understand the difference. I wanted to share that with you. So many thanks. Check out the separate reviews of both of these guns and we'll see you next time. Take care.